Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you build a better creative business. And today on the show, I have Megan Risk. Megan is one of my favorite people that I've met on the convention circuit. I met her doing horror conventions many years ago and have seen her at all sorts of conventions. Basically, all the big conventions that I do are the same big conventions that she does. And she's just wonderful. And I brought her on because she has a Kickstarter for her book, Marionette. And since we just had on Melissa talking about her Kickstarter for Above the Clouds, I thought this would be a compliment to that, or a good compliment to that, because while a lot of the interview with Melissa talked about her Kickstarter, this is going to talk a lot more about conventions, which are two sides to how you have a successful Kickstarter, really, especially in comics and art. You know, running the convention circuit is going to be a big part of your business if you are doing art prints and such. And so I wanted to bring on Melissa to talk about that, her experience and her career. And it just dovetailed so nicely that she was running a Kickstarter while I was looking to book new guests. So I hope you enjoy this interview from one of the con warriors that I am very lucky to call friend. And if you do like this, please head on over to thecompletecreative.com and check out all of our courses, blog posts, epic blog posts and otherwise, and the archives to this podcast. And now, let's get on with our interview with Megan Risk. Take it away, Megan. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
These days, man, horror is really, it's a constant passion. That's like, I've been passionate about horror since I was a teenager, and probably earlier than that. So horror is still currently a passion, and I'm pretty sure that's not going away anytime soon.
You know what's crazy about shows that I have found about shows is, I guess this is not crazy. I did not know it. And now when I talk to other people, they have no idea either. The propensity for like women to dominate in like a horror convention, or like to like just be present at a horror convention and be like actively involved, is like way higher than any other kind of convention that I do.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I wonder. I've theorized about why, and I would love to get your input on it. But like, I think it's because going back to the beginning of horror movies, women had agency in these movies like they don't in any other genre of movie. Like from the beginning of horror, they were not just like the token like sex toy, like a wife or something. Like they had real, like they were the stars of horror movies.
How far back are you going here?
As far back as well, like as far back as the 80s, let's say the 80s.
Okay.
But I think like even before then, but like let's say like Halloween, Friday the 13th, like Nightmare on Elm Street kind of movies, kind of like time frame.
Yeah, that's interesting because the first movie I thought of when you brought that up was The Birds. I was thinking of Tippi Hedren and her role in that movie and how she's trying to imagine her as someone who has agency. And she does for, I think, the most part of the movie. But I think that suffers still from the era, the way women are thought of, and especially women in television and in movies. She still has that like save me mindset, especially at the very end. And she is kind of the token beauty, you know, who doesn't do very much, does a little bit, kind of. I love the movie The Birds. I absolutely love it. And then when you mentioned the 80s, I was trying to think that there's a ton. I mean, that was like kind of the era of like sex is bad. If you have premarital sex, then you're going to die. Jason's going to get you. Freddy's going to get you. And so they seem still like tokens But I think for the most part, the women still, or the last person standing is still a woman usually. Especially, and you think of Hellraiser as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're like the person who ends up killing the killer, or like winning, quote unquote winning in the end, at least in like the first movie, is generally a woman in horror. And when you look at literally any other genre, I mean, try to name a genre where you like the hero is not like the strapping man. It's hard. Like action, you have Indiana Jones and Star Wars, and in science fiction similarly, and fantasy, like it's Aragorn and all of these like big like beefy guys, which like I also don't identify with. But in like horror, the big beefy guy ends up eating it quite early in the movie, and it's like, and the smart sassy girl is the one who like
the wilting flower.
Right. Ends up like, and a lot of times you do have that. You have that like wilting flower at the beginning who ends up like finding her voice and like standing up, and like it's her that like saves the day.
Right.
I don't know if that's like the reason why there's so many women in horror fans, or I'm just skewed because I do horror conventions and horror shows, but yeah, I don't know, but I'd love I love that we're talking about it at least.
Yeah, I am too, because I think I get a lot when I go to conventions, particularly horror conventions. I just dress like as my normal. I don't dress in any particular way. I dress what's comfortable for me, or businesslike, depending on the convention that I'm at. Sometimes it's businesslike, sometimes it's very casual. But I dress like a normal, I guess, hippie person. Like I wear scarves and things, and then people will come to my booth and they'll look at my work and they'll think like, they'll say to me, "You drew this, but you look so nice." I'm like, I am fucking nice. I just dress like this. I don't know what you want me like. What were you expecting? What was your preconceived notion of how a woman should look in this field or behave?
Yeah, I liken it a lot to a lot of my friends who are writers love like serial killer podcasts and serial killer like shows, and like meanwhile they're like quite I don't want to say normal looking, because like what is normal now?
Yeah,
but like
that's what I struggle with too. Yeah,
you know,
what is
like
normal?
Yeah, what would you like?
I think it's the better way to describe it is I don't look the way that most people think I should look with the art that I produce, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I just remember looking at your work the first time and being like, holy hell, how did I not know that this existed in the world? It's like every once in a while you do a show and like I'm jaded. Like I've done like 150 of these, and you've done probably not that much fewer or even more than that. And like it's hard to see new at shows or something that like
up on 150.
Yeah, and like it's hard, right? It's hard to like have your calloused heart like be like, oh my God, this is a new thing and I like it and I don't know it exists.
Yeah, you do start to feel like you've seen it all after a while.
Well, because you kind of have.
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, you do the circuit.
When someone new comes along, you're so much more appreciative when you see something new and that appeals to you in a whole new and fresh way.
Yeah, I want to talk about like how you got here, but because you just brought that up, I do want to touch on like how, after doing so many shows, do you keep yourself relevant to the people that travel the circuit and like the people you see over and over again?
Mm-hmm. That comes from listening to people, and it comes from paying attention. It comes from being also a fan of the thing that you are making art for. So my fans, we are fans of the same thing. So when I go to an anime show, I'm also a fan of a lot of anime. So we all have that in common. When I go to a comic show, I'm also a fan of many comics. So we have that in common. And I'm listening to them constantly. And I'm asking my friends when it's a topic that I'm not necessarily that familiar with, I'll ask my friends, hey, what is really popular in that world right now? What's popular to you? What would you like to see? And I'll ask a bunch of people that and take that feedback, and that will contribute to whatever I decide to make next. With horror, it's really easy because I am just a plain old horror fan. So I have a pretty good idea of what is popular out there and what people would like to purchase and what they are already purchasing, because it's usually the same thing as what I'm purchasing. And then video games is another big time. It's another thing that I'm passionate about. I've been playing video games since I can remember. I'm pretty sure, like, I want to say my entire life, just because it's the first thing that I remember doing is playing Bubble Ghost on that old Mac with the green screen. And then I just grew up with them. So I've been following that for 32 years, and same with horror. So that's how you keep in touch. You have to listen to people. You have to sort of immerse yourself in the fandom, or else you're going to be lost.
Yeah, I love that answer because so many times people ask me like what I should do first, and I'm like, well, probably something you care about. Like the best marketing or the best creating comes from like what you will actually do, and you'll probably actually do the thing that you love.
Right. The first convention I had my work at, I had 4 prints. It was 2 narratives and 2 that were just cool. It was Freddie and Jason were the 2 narrative portraits, which are still my top sellers to this day, 2 or 3 years later, I think 3 years now. And then I had the twins from The Shining, which is a print that I've retired, and Pennywise, which is still a print that sells like crazy, but I'm getting close to retire because I want to redo it. And those prints, I sold more of those 4 prints or just as many as already established artists. And it was because those are the 4 things I wanted to do. I wanted to paint all 4 of those prints. They appealed to me, and I painted them in a way that I thought was really unique. It was something that I just sort of learned. I took it right from one of my art classes, and I enjoyed doing them. So I think that really affected how successful my that convention was for me. That was my very first convention. It kind of spoiled me, but I was still stoked. I realized, holy shit, I can actually do this. I can actually make a career and live off of my work.
That's like the craziest feeling in the world. I'm like, when you come back from a show and you're like, wait, like this is enough to pay my mortgage this month. And I like what you talked about uniqueness, because I think when you are established in a world and you see all of the things in it and you like really immerse yourself in the culture of that world, it becomes a lot easier to be like, well, why haven't they done this in this way? And why haven't they combined these 2 things together? And like, I would really like to see that. And if you feel that way and you're part of the world, then it's a good chance that other people feel that way too. Yeah, but part of that trust, don't you think part of that trust comes from just being immersed in the world? Like I am like tangentially part of the horror community, but like I am very at home in comic conventions and fantasy and manga, because like those are like the 3 areas that I rotate in. And then I sometimes touch horror because Ichabod's horror and a lot of my stuff is dark fantasy. But like being involved in that, I almost, because I buy, I don't know, thousands of comics a year at this point, at least hundreds of comics a year, and like hundreds of books, and I read them all. When I make a decision, I feel like it's so much more informed than if I was making a decision on like writing a romance book, because like I am there.
Absolutely. Yeah. That it just goes back to like both of us have said, immersing yourself. I'm not 100, like I think comics are not my specialty as much as I do like them. I'm kind of a casual fan. So I look to my friends a lot as far as advice. And after spending a few years listening to my friends, I've genuinely gained some interest in things that I didn't have interest in before. So that has kind of opened the door for some more immersive interaction in that fandom. So that's exciting. It's like I get to discover something that I like all over again, and other people can live vicariously through me.
That's awesome. But it also, so this is the dichotomy, right? Because it is super important to be immersive in the things that you love, but sometimes you get myopic in that fandom, and it's hard to see like what to do that is unique in that fandom, because you end up following a lot of trends. So doing something that is kind of outside of that fandom, like it allows you to like sort of take what you love and see it in a fresh light. So let's backtrack for a second, and I would like you to talk a little bit about your journey to this place, and tell the viewers and myself. I would like to know also, like how you got to where you are today, which is like badass creator, go around the convention scene, like making a living on their art.
Okay, I'm ready.
Go for it.
Okay. So I should probably start just a little bit with growing up. I'll try to make all of this as succinct as possible, so I'm not rambling. But my dad is an artist. He was an artist for Lockheed back before I was born, and I think the first year that I was born. And I grew up just surrounded by art. My dad is a very technical artist. And funny enough, he wasn't 100% convinced that I would be successful as a freelance artist or as an artist in general, because I think that he was very self-conscious about his own work. But if you think I'm good, my dad is better, in my opinion. And he's just an incredible artist who has transferred his skills and expertise into the construction world. He is a tile contractor now, and he makes incredible, beautiful stonework that it kills me every time. He's just like, I'm not an artist anymore. I'm like, no, Dad, you're an artist. Shut up. So that's what I grew up with. I grew up with a family that really had a deep appreciation for artwork. So I was always being given art supplies as a kid. It was a way for me to escape, before I became old enough to have my own video games, or before video games became as they are now, or as they were even 20 years ago. So that was where the love of being personally creative started. And then as I got older, I took my first art course in high school. I'd always been like doing crafty courses and art classes and stuff, but it was never like your high school art class where they're actually teaching you skills. And that's where I started to realize, hey, I'm like kind of good at this. And every time before that, I was making artwork in order to not be bullied. I was bullied very bad as a child. And when I started to draw, people started to change their attitude. I felt like I had some worth. As shitty as that sounds, that's just a fact. I started to feel like I had worth because people recognized that I could do something and they were impressed by it. And then high school just made the skills improve. And then once I got out of high school and I started going to college, I thought I was going to be a writer. I was taking creative writing courses. So beside the art courses, I was taking creative writing. So, and I still continued that into college. I took creative writing and art courses. And then I started to realize I'm actually really enjoying these art courses combined with the creative writing courses, because it's really fun to draw from writing. And it helps your creativity. Those two things go so well together. being able to draw and understanding creative writing and literature. It improves everything about both of those aspects. If you learn one and your specialty is the other one's going to improve the other. And then after that, I went to Humboldt State, or I was planning on going to Humboldt State, but instead I became a cocktail server and I just worked. And I spent about 3 years up there, and it was just a mess. It was at a time, it was 2008, so it was just impossible to work, live, and go to school at the same time for me in my specific case. And I was really unwilling to take out any student loans, so I really wanted to do it all by myself, but I couldn't up there. So I, about the last couple months of my stay in Humboldt, I started to do portraiture again. I hadn't drawn. I had a very long dry spell. And I did a portrait for a friend, and she loved it. And then everybody else that I was friends with was like, well, I want one too. So I just started doing portraits, and they started paying me for them. And then I left Humboldt, came back to Sacramento. I grew up in Cameron Park. I forgot to mention that. Came back to Sacramento, was planning on finishing up my AA and going to Sac State to get my bachelor's in art. I was a sushi chef at that time. I was no longer cocktailing. So that was, and I hated it. I hated working for the people that I worked for, but I loved making sushi, and I loved everything about the discipline that came with sushi making and the creativity that was encouraged of the men in sushi making, and for some reason not me. So I was eager to get out of it, and I finally finished up my AA and was looking into the courses at Sac State for studio art. But then I at some point in there, when I was doing the sushi thing, I met Michael Calero, who was the handyman at my apartment complex that I lived at. And he came in to fix something in my apartment one day and saw my nerd shit all over the walls. And we started talking about nerdy things and art. He saw my drafting table and everything, and he was curious about my artwork. So we started talking art and comics, and he told me about how he wanted to do comic. And then we became friends after that. And he really showed me the ropes as far as inking and comic making. And I got really excited about inking for comics, so I did a little bit of inking for him. And he was really nice to give me some practice stuff to ink with. And after that, I moved out of the apartment, started working for a different restaurant, started going back to school, finished up my AA, decided not to go to Sac State because I, after Michael got me into that whole convention world, introduced it to me, I actually went to a convention to help a friend with her artwork, or her crafts, and sell at a convention. It was Wizard World, Sacramento, like 2 or 3 years ago. And I was introduced to a whole lot more people. And I really got to see what it was like at a convention to sell your work. And I saw what other people were selling. And I got a chance to compare my work with others and see where I stood in all of that, and talked myself into having enough courage to bring my own work. And then I was introduced to Adam Killenberger, who runs Comic Boards Inc. and is also a very good longtime childhood friend of Michael Calero. And Adam got me actually into the convention world where I was selling work, and we just haven't stopped since then. And now awesome. I've got a comic coming out. So that's kind of the whole story with some missing pieces, but like
that's awesome. I have so many tangents that I want to explore. I guess I'll start at the beginning and then work backwards because I wonder, do you think having a father who was actually making a living on their art made it easier to think that you could do it too?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, when you grow up with that, you see it. You see it in person, in action. And we had struggles. We absolutely had struggles. But I watched my parents overcome those struggles. So it wasn't just a matter of here is a person who can be successful from their artwork, but a team that can overcome obstacles that come from being an artist.
That's wonderful.
And that was huge.
That's wonderful. When I moved to LA, I had like the first people that I met were just like people that like made a living as writers, and like their whole like their wives and husbands were writers, and like this was just like the thing. And I always when people ask me like why should I move to LA, I'm like because like you like surround yourself with like people who just do it. It's not like some pie in the sky idea. It's just like, oh, like I was in Santa Barbara last week shooting this show, and you're like, oh, people just like talk about that as if it's normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think people. So you mentioned that you would go to LA. I mean, you live in LA. You're surrounded by people who are just doing it. I think a lot of people take for granted how much you can learn from people by just watching them do it instead of like having them sit down and like teach you a lesson. Like you can learn so much by just paying attention. The lessons are good too, but just paying attention can be huge.
Yeah, just showing up and like watching stuff. And that's why I like conventions, because like you're literally surrounded by people like by definition, at least trying, but often succeeding at making a living doing the thing that you want to do. Like you walk into those halls, and yes, there are like those superstar rock star people, but there's a lot of just like journeymen who like are like, yeah, I think of like Ben Russell, who just kills conventions, and you're like, he's just like killing conventions, and like you never have heard of him probably, but like here he is flying all over the country doing these shows and like making a living, and he's been doing it for years, and there are tons of people like that too.
Yeah, and the people who are not as successful are also what you can learn from them is equally valuable.
Right. I mean, I remember the first show that I went to, or the first show that I tabled at, people would come up and ask me questions, and I'm like, I'm not qualified. And then they were like, actually, you're very qualified, because like this is your first convention. Like I'm actually closer to you than I am to like how like Mike Mignola would get to conventions, because it's like, obviously I know how Mike Mignola gets to conventions, but I have no idea how to like some no-name human just does their first thing. And like that is equally inspirational, because you're like, oh, like it's not just Mike Mignola here, or like name your favorite artist. It's like just random human who like just made a thing. And I think there's something really, really mind-blowing about like, oh, so you just made this and then like came here to sell it?
Yeah, people, they have that reaction to me often. They're just like, so how do you make your prints? I'm like, I order them. They're like, oh, it's that easy. I just have them ordered. I have a printer that I order my prints from. I have to make them. I got to do the artwork. But as far as like getting the pieces and getting it there, I just order it.
Right. Yeah. I was just talking last week because I just finished a Kickstarter, and like all the books came in, and like I've been lugging them around, and I'm like, God, if someone told me how much roadie work I would be doing as a professional writer, like nobody ever tells you that like half of it is like lugging boxes around.
Oh, I tell people.
Well, yes, I tell them now also. But when I was coming up, they were like,
no one told us.
I had that like Ernest Hemingway version of being a writer, which was like, oh, you're going to go and you're going to travel the world, and you're going to like write in all these exotic locations, and then like someone else will handle all of that. And I was like, where's the someone else? Like, when does the someone else come and like load my boxes for me into my car?
Adam just pointed at himself. He's the someone else. He carries all my backpacks and all my snacks.
That's nice. I end up doing it all myself, which is less nice. And books are heavy. You'll find that out. It's like
the prints. I'm not looking forward to that part.
Prints are
But
like nice and light. Like you have to have the big trellis in behind you, but like books are like their own stand, but they
oh
are
yeah,
immeasurably harder to lug.
yeah, that's the next step for me.
Yeah, it's I mean it's wonderful. Like I never got the art print part of it because like I'm not the artist. When I bring prints, they're like, "You drew this?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Oh, bye." But
Oh
like
yeah, that sucks.
um
It's so crappy. I mean, I understand that people really love to purchase directly from the artist, but there are times when the artist can't be there, or they're at a different show. They want to do both the shows at the same time, and they're just as deserving of the support. It's such a bummer.
it is because like you're like, well, you know, I hired these artists to do these prints, and like if you want to support the artists, like I can go back to them and like get more prints, and like how successful these books do is quite a bit dependent on whether I continue to hire them, which is like most of the I mean most of the people that I hire to do prints, like they're full time working in comics or in books or something, and you're like, okay, well, like I can't hire these people. Like they're like that's where they're getting their income. They're not getting it on like portraiture, or they're not doing it on like commissions. They're mostly making their money like being hired by person. And you're like, okay, if you want me to continue hire person, you must buy book so I can make enough money to hire person to make more book.
It's all connected. People just see what's in front of them, and I can't say I blame them. That's sort of the way we live. But it would be very very nice if more people understood the chain that happens when you purchase artwork from somebody,
Yeah,
even if
that
it's
would
not
be
the
nice.
artist.
You know, I
As
kind of
long
thought.
as that person is an actual representative, not just stealing the work and selling it at shows.
Right. Yes. That's we're gonna take that off the table for like this conversation. We're talking about like we're all assuming that this is like legit work that we're doing because like it's quite a bit easier to like just steal a bunch of work and put it at a convention and like have them not do anything because unfortunately the convention won't actually like remove somebody even if you have a literal proof that they're stealing your art.
So rare. Yeah, I can't think of a time. I mean, I can think of times when someone has had their work stolen and sold at shows, and I can't think of a time that that person has been kicked out or removed because of that, that just sucks.
So I was at Phoenix Comic Con the first 2 years that I did it. We moved this past year, but the first 2 years I did it, across from me was this big booth. It's like a 10 by 20, which is quite a large booth for those of you who don't do shows. Like the biggest booth someone would legitimately get would be like a 20-foot by 20-foot booth. A standard booth is like 10 by 10. And like this was like in the vein of like the biggest booth that you get. And across the top of this booth, it said, "We will put anything, any picture you find on the internet on anything." And I was like,
no.
I was like, yeah, it was quite upsetting the first 2 years. And I would ask, I'd be like, could you, like, it's so blatant.
Yeah.
It's so blatant. Like they're literally saying, I will rip off any art and
we will steal from anyone.
And I went through 3 years. They were there. All 3 years that I did Phoenix Comic Con, including this year when I was moved, they're still there.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's
so irritating. We're not going back to Phoenix Comic Con.
Yeah, there's a list of shows that like I think let's talk about conventions then. Let's not gripe about like one specific convention, but like how do you decide what shows to do? Let's go let's go past the how do you book a show and just assume like if you're wondering how to book a show, it's pretty easy. You go to convention scene or one of the other places, Con if that's still around, Connosaurus if it's still around. But basically you find the website and all of the websites have like a submission thing. Some of them are curated and some of them you just can buy a table and then like if the ones you can buy a table, you just literally buy the table and then you have the table. And that's literally as simple as it goes. There are some other ones that are curated or like that like are a little more complicated than that. But generally, like 90% of conventions in this country, you just go to their site, find the like the table price, and
Right.
then like buy it.
Yeah,
So
you either buy it or you contact somebody and then they send you an invoice for it or something like that.
yes,
But
sometimes 4 months late.
yeah,
I've had that happen. I literally had that happen at a show recently where like I
yeah,
submitted in August and like it's November and I'm like the show was literally next week. I have to book a hotel. Am I
yep.
doing this? And they like begrudgingly were like, just bring the money to the show. I'm
My
like, okay,
God,
okay. But anyway, so let's go past all of that.
there's
And
so much.
and how, like,
There's so
how
much
do you
to complain
decide?
about, though. Yes. So that is such a hard question because sometimes we just flip a coin. I do probably around 45 to 54 conventions a year. This year has been very much down compared to the previous years. It's just kind of what happens. It's the ebb and flow of the business of selling prints, which is why I'm trying to adapt. That's another bit of advice for later. Anyway, we will compare. So I have, I don't think my knowledge is very fair because I got everything from Adam, who knows way more about conventions than me. He's been doing conventions a lot longer from me, and he's friends with people who have been doing conventions for a lot longer than me, including showrunners. So we are friends with quite a few showrunners, and now we're showrunners. So that helped tremendously, and it was kind of, I don't want to say it was cheating, but I definitely felt lucky to have made the friends that I did because that made it a lot easier. I was able to just look to Adam. He'd say, hey, give me this much for a table for this. We're doing this convention next month. And I'd be like, okay. And then I would send him money. Ideally, that's how it works. But there are conventions that I want to do that he doesn't necessarily know about or he didn't know about before, or that he doesn't really feel confident bringing the work that he represents there. So I'll do the convention and he'll hang out and sort of get a feel for everything. Or we'll just go to a convention. So this year we went to Lightbox because it was the first time we'd heard about it. We saw who was going to be there and it was intense and we were very excited to go there just as guests. So we did that. And Adam discovered that he wouldn't feel comfortable bringing art to represent, but I felt more comfortable bringing my artwork because it was kind of a general be a cool artist show. There was a lot of different stuff there, a lot of animation, a lot of 2D artists, 3D artists, reps for art companies. That was awesome. So we'll do stuff like that. But most of the time, I look at the previous year's calendar and I remember which shows had the attendance and which shows did not, and I'll pick and choose from that. Sometimes we'll have an empty month and we just need to fill it so we can do something. And that is enough to get us through to the next month. So we'll look around we do big shows, small shows, and we've found success at every type of show. So we try not to be too picky, but we try to balance out the pickiness, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
So you've now done quite a few of these shows. Let me ask the question another way.
Mm-hmm.
If you could reach back into Megan of the past before she did any shows and like before she ever met an Adam, and now tell Megan the three things that you would look for in a good show, what would you tell her?
Organization, communication between between you and whoever is sending out information, like show the floor maps, the information for load in and load out, all of that. If all of that information is organized and it's communicated properly and people are responsive on the other end. So if the showrunner and the crew are responsive to your questions and concerns, that is fantastic. I would look for that. And I guess communication and organization are kind of connected. Good advertising. So if you see the show advertised anywhere, comic stores, flyers, restaurants, billboards, commercials, radio commercials, online. If you see that, then that is a very good sign. If a show doesn't have any advertising, how's anybody going to know to show up? And then you won't get the attendance. And then the guests. The guests are important too. So are these friendly guests? What kind of guests are there? Are they guests that you already have artwork of? My very first show, I sold probably the majority of Freddy Krueger because Robert Englund was there. So people wanted to get the artwork and go get it signed by him, and that's fantastic. So I think those three things are the best advice that I can give people as far as how to make the decision if a show is a good fit for you.
I love the last point because I tell people this all the time when they're going to do art. I'm like, look at the guests, because most people are going to buy prints. Maybe not most people, but a lot of people are going to buy prints, and they're looking around the show for something unique that they can get the person signed. So like most people don't want to just have them sign a headshot. They're looking for something, and a lot of them are not bringing it, or maybe they're bringing like a backup, but they're looking for that thing. So if you can't make the thing, if you don't have the thing, can you make the thing for like one or several of the big guests before the show? Because that sometimes is the difference between like a winning show and a mediocre or losing show.
Yeah, you can make all of your money on that one print. If it's that kind of show and you've got that kind of guest and you have that kind of print, you can make all of your money on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will give people a super secret tip that I use, which is I never or rarely do a show in its second year, even if I did it the first year. Yeah.
Because second year shows are rough.
Yeah, the second year show is like the correction. I've done so many of these first year shows and they've been bananas. And then the second year, I'm like, it goes down to like a 10th. And then the third year, it either dies or it like comes back up to its level. But like a show's got to be real special at this point for me to do a show in its second year, because I've seen people push all of their marketing in year one and then just be like, well, now we're here, so bye.
Oh, God, and that is so frustrating because you have to continue that marketing. You can't just let your success right off of that first year. You have to maintain the momentum.
Well, and a lot of times it's not even necessarily the showrunner's fault. It's just like there was excitement for that first year. Like there was excitement for a show in like this location, and like there's never been a show in this location before. But so everyone went. Like the little old grandma went. Like the kids went. Like all the people went because it was like the biggest thing. And then like the next year, it's like, oh, well, we did that.
We got to figure out how to overcome that year two lull.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, well, I'm not one of the reasons I've never run a show despite being asked is because like of that, like, it's like, I think I could do the first year really well, but like then I will lose interest in the show just like other people will lose interest in a show. Like it's just natural. It's like the second issue of a book, the second book in a series, like anything that's a number 2 is like the biggest drop off, because like in the book world, it's like 50% or more drop off from book 1 to book 2.
Right. Something else I've noticed with shows is that the first year will be fantastic, and then that showrunner will get a big head, and the next year will extend the show, increase the size of the show floor, take on more vendors, and then it's just too big on year 2. It's too many days. The floor has gotten way too big, and the people like get overwhelmed, and it wasn't big enough to support multi-days anyway. And they just get like overly excited, and they want to go bigger and better already, and they don't pace themselves properly. Yeah,
every time, like 90% of shows could be done in 1 6-hour day.
Yeah.
And you make the same. You make roughly the same. Maybe you make like 10% more on that second day, but like If you can do it in 2 days, you can do it in 1 day. And
Yeah,
it's,
just less time.
I mean, for the showrunner, like they want to make that second day ticket sales. It's so
Yeah.
much cheaper to expand to a second day than like that. Usually the Saturday is like the big day, and then Sunday is like really cheap to get on, and then Thursday and Friday are really cheap to add on. So it's like, wow, well, like I could have a 4 day show, but like
Yeah.
it's really tough for me to be like, yes, this show should be 2 days. And usually when
Yeah.
people are like, good news, we're doing a third day, I'm always like, oh God, this is going to destroy the
same.
show.
It's like, please don't. And I know that some of the venues will require you to have 3 days. So some people have been stuck where they're like, this is the only place for us to have this show. The venue requires 3 days. It has to be 3 days.
Right.
So
Or
that's
it'll be
a bummer.
Or it'll say you don't get priority unless you get this amount of time.
Yeah,
so like,
which also sucks.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough all around. So this is my big question that I ask, and like I think it's the most important question I ask on this whole show was like, knowing it's tough all around, like how do you get the motivation to keep doing it year over year, month over month?
I'm very stubborn. And I've spent a lot of time doing something that I didn't like doing. And I want that to change. And I know from experience that there are, having lived with a family that has gone through hard times, I know that it's possible to get through a hard time. So when things are rough, you've got to be able to adapt to whatever the demands are of the time. So if print sales are going way down, people don't seem interested in prints anymore, I have to adapt. I got to start doing books. I've got to start doing like art books, selling prints on things. People love to wear their artwork now. You've got to, if it comes to it, get a second job too. Like I think that's the thing that scares me the most as a freelancer who's doing this full time is like, you have to fight that feeling of like, I'm a failure because I had to get a day job or something like that. But that's just, we shouldn't have to feel that way. It should just be part of how we need to adapt to that situation and get through a hard time. It's not the end of it. Nothing's going to stop me from making my artwork. I'm going to do that no matter what. It's more about how much time I have in a day to commit to that.
I just read an article about acting, and this was the case. It's like we need to stop, like not insulting, but like denigrating. I guess they're the same word, but denigrating actors for having a second job. Like it's such like elitist trash to like say that. And like frankly, I meet a lot of artists who like, I don't want to say can't. Let's say don't want the burden of doing this full time. Like they, like, so I was having a conversation with my friend the other day, and I was like, she was talking about how like I'm massively depressed, and like it's hard for me to like keep like doing the writing and all the things a lot of the time. And she was telling me about this time in her life that like was really tough. I was like, well, that's great. And I understand that, but like, this is a life I've engineered for myself. And like, I'm still dealing with these issues. And like, I've had the shitty job and like the depression and like the pressure and all of that stuff when like the job was horrible and like life was horrible and like the pressure was horrible. But my fear is like, I'm not in that place now. Like I'm in a place that more or less I do what I want when I want, and I still like feel it. Yeah,
same. I'm on antidepressants. It's just, this is just us. It's not, you hear people, I mean, you see it too. You see it in Hollywood, where people who seem like they have everything and seem like they're as happy as a person can be are dying prematurely, or they're struggling, and too many people are like, well, what do you have to be upset about? And it has nothing to do with that.
And I say life, like literally life. Like, do you exist in the world? Like life is what I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
But like sometimes you need that like job. It's like, I understand. It's like when people, I talk about marketing a lot with people, and I'm like, look, like if you don't want to do this and you just want to be a teacher all day and do your art on the side, like that is fine.
I see nothing wrong with that at all. That we have very successful friends in the convention world who still, I say still, but who've maintained their day job, and they do perfectly fine. They make incredible work. They go to conventions, they sell their work, and then they go home, and during the week they have another job. It's just more.
Right. Or it's just like, then they can go to the show and it not have to have that pressure of like, oh, this has to be. And I'm like, as a person who sometimes can do a show now where like there's no pressure, where it's like, oh my God, it's so much different, man. But it's so much different. I want to talk about your book, but before I do, I've got to ask, like, do you plan on doing 40 to 50 shows every year? Because like I did that one time, and like now I do 20, and it's a lot.
No, and I imagine as my career evolves, because I would like to do more writing and more contract work, that I will not be able to do as many shows. It was my strategy in the beginning was to get myself out there and visible as much as absolutely possible. And the shows were very profitable for me. So I was able to, it was just a bonus that it all worked out. But it was never a plan to do this many shows. I really have aspirations to do so many other things, especially more creative work that isn't just like pinups here and there. I'd really like to do covers. I would like to do more illustrations for books. That is really exciting to me. I plan on doing more things like Marionette, more illustrated short stories. So that is how I'm going to be evolving my career. That way, these shows will be less pressure, because right now there's an intense amount of pressure at the show, and it makes it very difficult for to be approachable, because you're just sitting there thinking about all of your bills that aren't paid yet, and how much you just are just like, buy my print, please buy my print.
Yeah, I had 2 nervous breakdowns last year at Phoenix, not this year, but the previous last year, because like the money went half. I mean, half, it was half, and I was like, that's like a mortgage payment. That's like half is like more than a mortgage payment. Like, how am I gonna like survive in like half? And like, I knew this on like Friday. Like, there was just no way that I could get even close to the previous year. And I was like, I like, how is this sustainable? I was like, I literally had like 2 breakdowns.
Yeah, that's the moment of I'm in trouble, and then you got to adapt, whatever the adaptation may be, and you have to you just got to do it. You got to figure it out. You can't lose the control that you have over everything. You've got to maintain that control, and don't let other people tell you how to maintain your control or what is respectable or not. You just got to do what you need to do.
Absolutely. I've been talking a lot recently about like the person who spends the most on marketing wins. And people are like, I can't believe you did so many shows. I'm like, yeah, well, like they're marketing and profit in one thing. Like I understand the world of like, look me in the eye and look at my stuff and then buy it. And then now we made a connection and I made money. It took years for me to start doing the same thing online, but like it's almost its own, while terrifying and like exhausting, it's almost its own built-in like marketing funnel by itself.
Yeah. I tell people, think of it as a resume. You're showing people your resume, your portfolio, and they come to your booth. It's not just people who want to see or want to buy stuff. It's also people who are thinking about a future project. They want to see what else you can do. They want to see how variable your artwork can be. And then they might contact you later for a large project. And then that's fantastic. That is you marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can do it online or other places, but like for me, it was just an elegant solution at the beginning.
Yeah. Right.
So speaking of marketing, I've been talking about getting to Marionette for like the last 15 minutes, and I just keep having questions and questions and questions for you. But like the reason we're having this interview is because you have a Kickstarter campaign that's live. Can you talk to me
or
about
it's about
it?
to be live.
Well, this is
Maybe
going
by
to go
the
up
time this
later,
goes
so
up.
we're going to pretend like it's live for the sake of this.
It's live. Yes, the illustrated short story, Marionette, both written and illustrated by me. It's horror. It's akin to the type of horror you'd get from some of the Stephen King novels, and Edgar Allan Poe, Junji Ito, Stephen Gammel's artwork has inspired me a lot. So as far as like the feeling, it's a lot of show don't tell, or I try to make it show don't tell. And it has a lot to do with attachments, strange family members, connections and disconnections. And I actually have been working on this since high school. It's gone through 3 or 4 different evolutions, and this is its final evolution. We can make Pokemon references.
I was really trying not to. It was
Gotcha.
Why are dolls so creepy? Like,
what's that?
Why are dolls so creepy?
So I've talked about this in a different interview before, but I don't like dolls. I don't care for them. I find them very uncomfortable. I think it has to do with the uncanny valley, and the lack of expression on a face that is a face. So our brains are programmed to recognize faces, and when that uncanny valley, when it falls into the uncanny valley, we get very uncomfortable. They just they creep me out. And for the going back into my history, I have a grandmother on my father's side. We don't talk to any of them anymore. We don't talk to that side of the family. But I grew up, my grandmother had a massive obsessive collection with dolls. And there was a guest room where my memory is kind of fuzzy, but the memory that I'm left with is it just covered in everything had a doll on it. Like every surface had a doll on it. I remember there being one of those beams that go across the top of the room where you can like put things, and there were just dolls everywhere looking down at you in this guest room while I slept. And I didn't like it. And I didn't like, it was just a lot of negativity, a lot of bad energy. And it has left me with this feeling of discomfort for dolls and that sort of attachment to that kind of stuff. It's gross.
That's fascinating. I have my own theory that I'm going to put on top of this.
All right.
Okay, so horror historically has been about something coming and attacking you from the outside. It's been external threats, right? Mm-hmm. Not all horror, but the large, vast majority of horror has been some external threat coming to you. But as we as a species have like gotten up, especially like first world countries have gone up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we've moved from these external threats that we fear. Like we no longer fear, well, hopefully some of us at least, no longer fear like the other nearly as much as we once did. What we fear are these internal things that are coming to hurt us, the internal dread of existence, of ennui, of families, and that's something that we love dearly, something that we're supposed to feel safe around, whether that's our home or a family member, like an orphan, or like a doll. Something that's inside of our house is coming, and that is what the true terror is now.
That is perfect. That's a great explanation for Marionette. It's something that you should trust, something that is, it's supposed to put you at ease, but something inner is messing with your perception of that. It's the unreliable viewpoint. You don't know who in this is correct. And it messes with that's what I always loved about Edgar Allan Poe, because I think he was very good at that inner that inner fear that you're talking about. There's no outside other. It's all within a cask of Amontillado, Telltale Heart. Those people are unreliable. You don't trust the narrator by the end. You wonder what actually happened, what perception you would have had of whatever the narrator is angry with, and whether or not they're justified in their actions by the end.
Right.
And that's the type of thing that I'm exploring with Marionette.
Yeah, and I've been diving into Lovecraft more and more and more with each year, and like that's his thing, right? It's like the true horror is like not even other people. It's like that the universe doesn't care about you, and like there's nothing there, and like you have to like the thing you're worried about is like the thing you should truly fear is like this existential like doom that's coming for you.
Right.
And
am I a person? How do I know I'm a person?
Right, exactly. Okay, so can I ask you a tough question?
Please.
Okay, so like there's 1,000 Kickstarters going, right? Like why should I care about your Kickstarter? Like what makes it unique from all of the other things that are bombarding mine and my audience's like eyeballs all day, every day?
Well, I feel I have a really unique perspective or a unique presentation of horror. As I've said, I am a complete horror fanatic. It's more than just adrenaline rush. It's the exploration of your own psyche. And what fascinates me is what makes other people uncomfortable, what makes other people afraid. And I like to pinpoint that and see what happens and experiment with other people's fears. I have a trio of horror ladies that I call the Three Sisters. It's Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Speak No Evil, that have been sort of my flagship trio for a while. And when people approach that, they're like, this is terrifying and I love it and I need it in my house. And that is always the most fascinating reaction to me. Is like, it's terrifying, but I love it. That combination is so fascinating to me. I want to figure that out and I want to tap into that more, because if it's too scary, then people aren't going to be interested. They're not going to want anything to do with it. I don't think I'm ever going to get to that point. But if it makes you think enough and you want to explore that in yourself, that's my goal. I want you to think about what you're thinking about. Really consider how you feel about what's happening in this story or what you're seeing on the paper as far as artwork. Do you like it? Why do you like it? Why are you afraid of it? Why are you afraid of it and you like it? Ask those questions. And I plan on continuing to ask those questions with the other work that I'm going to be putting out, the other books.
I love it. I mean, if I can say that's so creepy. I love it. I must have it. Like that's like the highest compliment. Like aside from I kind of hate you for how beautiful this is and that I didn't make it. Like those are the top two compliments that I can give. All right. So I have one more question, I think, and then we can wrap it up. Which is how scared are you of doing something in a brand new medium and delivering it in a whole new way that you've never delivered it before?
Oh, I would love to do that. That sounds like a wonderful challenge. I wouldn't be afraid of that.
Yeah, so you're excited about this Kickstarter?
Yes, very much. Afraid is not, I think, the right term. So if we're going to relate it to the Kickstarter, I'm very anxious. I am nervous. I am excited. I'm so excited to introduce this to the world, something that I've been working on for essentially almost 15 years, that has gone through so many different polishings and different coats of paint and different iterations. It's flipped so far from where it started. And I'm hopeful, and fear is not the right word for it. I would not say that would scare me.
That's great. Most people say they're absolutely terrified, and that's the thing that they get. So, like, but based on the hour that we've just spent together, I'm not surprised that like you are not fearful and you're more like excited than anything, because jumping
Yeah.
into the unknown feels like a thing that you're very comfortable with.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And at this level, yes. I'm ready to adapt. I'm ready to show people my writing as well as what I can do with my artwork. People are going to see something from me that they haven't really seen before. They've only seen little elements of it in the work that I do. They're going to see my writing, which no one has seen before. And I think that has probably got me the most anxious out of everything, because no one knows that. They just think that I'm an artist. Adam didn't even know I wanted to be a writer when we talked about it. So,
well, I am absolutely excited for it. All right. So, I'm going to ask you the question now that I asked to end all the podcasts, which is first, you can tell us where you can find yourself online, your website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, but then, this is the time that all of the people who've been zoning out doing their art, or like driving in their car, or like just having this on because my dulcet tones and your dulcet tones are just like lulling them into a sense of security. Okay. Now it's time they wake up. They wake up for like the next 5 minutes, and you're going to tell them where they can find you to learn more, and the best piece of advice that you could give to move forward an art career. It could be something that we talked about. It could be something completely brand new.
Okay. Listen up, people. You can find me at www.meganrisk.com. That is my main website. You can also buy a few prints off of there. Not everything is listed because not everything can be listed, but you'll find my originals on there for sure. Information about commission prices and commission details are available there as well. You can also find me at Facebook, Megan E. Risk. Go to my professional page, which is The Art of Megan E. Risk. Please do not go to my personal page. That is for personal use. You can find me at Instagram, same, Megan E. Risk, at Megan E. Risk. Twitter, which I really don't use very often. I just use it to cross-post, so it's really not that special. But it's at megerisk.com. Like I said, it's cross-posting, so you'll still get interesting stuff on there, but I don't really use it that much. What's my the Kickstarter? I'll have that listed on honestly everywhere. I've got it. The link to my Kickstarter is definitely going to be all over my Facebook page. That is really the best place to get information from what I'm doing next is Facebook. Instagram is second. Well, what was the other question? What are the other questions?
Yeah, the question is, what is the best piece of advice that you would give somebody to move forward in their art career? It could be something.
A fan. So the advice I'd give is to be a fan. If you want to move forward in your art career, be a fan of other people's artwork. I hear people so often who just crap on artwork because they're like, I could do that myself. It's not. That's not what it's about. It's not about what you can do yourself. And if you can, then fantastic. Maybe try that, but make it better. Getting inspiration from other people and being a fan of other people is so helpful for your work because you get inspired and you learn from those people that you idolize. When you walk around as your own biggest fan and no one's ever going to be as good as you, and you've reached the peak of your creativity and your success, then you've already failed. So you will never improve if you have that mindset. Be a fan. Like other people. Support other people. Just enjoy things. It's okay.
I cannot tell you how much I love that information. Thank you so much, Megan, for being here. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So that was my interview with Megan Risk. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to go hit her up and tell her how much you enjoyed it, and let her know how helpful that she was. And make sure to check out her Kickstarter, Marionette, which is on Kickstarter right now. And if you like this show, please let me know by leaving a review and subscribing. It really does help. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.